Hey guys, Scott and Vanessa Martindale here with Blended Kingdom Families. At BKF, we believe now is the time to change the modern day interpretation of the blended family.
Absolutely, you guys. As a blended family ourselves, God laid it on our hearts to build a ministry that helps support blended families by equipping your marriage, uniting the family unit, and igniting your faith. Our mission is that you would be touched by God and experience His goodness through this ministry, that your family would have practical skills, resources, and tools to help you live that abundant blended life.
Hey guys, welcome to the BKF podcast. So grateful that you are here today. If you haven't already, please take an opportunity and subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. You'll be alerted every time we release a new podcast. Like, share. We would love to have you joined in our community. But right now, we're going to welcome an amazing guest with us, Claire Jennings. It is great to have you, and welcome.
Yay. Thank you, guys. I'm honored to be here. So excited for today.
Yeah. Claire, I'm so thankful for the God connection with one of our producers, Diana. So I'm just excited that we get to share your story and hear from your heart today. But first, you guys, I just want to tell you a little bit about this awesome young lady right here. So Claire is a Louisiana girl living in Texas now with a heart for people and the local church. She manages creative projects and oversees marketing for Next Gen here at Gateway Church, which is our home church. Y'all probably already know that. Amazing church. Believes in the next generation and is hopeful for the future of the capital C church, which I love that you put that. Enjoys photography when she can do it and enjoys traveling every chance she gets, as well as writing. Writer.
Yes, that's a new thing. A new thing.
I love that. Love that. So, and just a little bit about, Claire's credentials. She's a young adults pastor, has been Healing Place Church social media lead, as well as Passion Conferences, Walk for Freedom, the A21 campaign digital media director, Christians United for Israel project manager, and at Gateway Church as well. And then currently she works at Gateway, like I just said, as a project manager in the Next Generation, along with overseeing all the marketing and communication in that department. So you are a busy lady.
It's been a good few years. I've been all around, but it's been good.
I love that. So you're just a creative. Love that.
Yeah, the creative world it's a fun world. I think once you get into it, you kind of get to be a part of so many things, which has been really special.
That's so cool. So cool. Well, Claire, we just, to start off the podcast, just tell our viewers, people who are watching, just a little bit about you, anything unique or fun you want to let them know, hobbies.
Yeah, so I grew up in Louisiana, like you guys were saying. I was actually in North Louisiana, which is funny because a lot of people there basically claim Texas. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I've been a Texan my whole life just because it's so close. Just right over the line of Louisiana. But from Louisiana, and just really just love the Lord. Like, I think, it's not like the most interesting thing to share, but like I just really fell in love with the Lord at a young age. And I really love the local church, and I'm sure that'll come out at some point in this. But I do love photography, like you mentioned. I love to do photography on the side. I don't pursue it full time by any means, but I really, like in the creative world, got to grab a hold of that, and I really appreciate that and love that just as a little outlet aside from what I'm doing. And getting to kind of share stories through photography has been really fun. And so I went to school in South Louisiana. I went to LSU, so I'm a big LSU Tiger fan. Some Texans don't love that, but I'm getting used to it. And then I lived in DC for a little bit. So I lived on Capitol Hill, which is a great experience. I do miss it. There's so many things that I really loved about that season. And then I moved to DFW last year. So I've been here for a little bit over a year. I'm still learning Texas highways and traffic and things like that. But I have an incredible family. I love my family so much. And I do love to travel. I mentioned that as well. I love to go anywhere, anytime. I'm pretty spontaneous. And so just a little bit about me. That's what I would say is, that really says a lot about me, is the travel and where I'm from and the family that I have.
Well, and your journey is, it is special. And I know that there's so much more to your story. So you're the youngest of 6.
Youngest of 6.
You were raised by a single mom. Your parents divorced when you were about 10. And that was not an easy process for you. And you mentioned the local church, and I have a feeling this is why that is so special to you, is that you talked about finding refuge in that local church. So I want to just dive into, what that experience was like for you. As a 10-year-old, you have 5 older siblings, and then we're going to get into the restoration part of this a little bit later. But walk us through that journey and what that was like for you.
Yeah, so I was the youngest, and so I think I had these protectors. My siblings were just such a covering for me for my whole life, even to this day. I mean, they would go up to bat for me any day, any second. And so, at 10 years old, it's interesting when you're that young because you are aware. You're definitely aware of what's going on, but you don't want to believe those things. You still have the innocence in your heart to think oh, that's not really what's happening here. But I definitely saw, my parents and the difficulties that they were going through. And, my dad was an emergency vet, so he worked at night, and my mom was a school teacher, and they had 6 kids. And so, my dad would come home, we would be leaving for school, we would get home, he was leaving for work. And so it was a difficult journey. And I saw that at 10, at, 8, 9, 10 years old, I began to see that those things really affected us as a family. And, we would go to several events, and it would just be us and my mom, and all of us played sports. And so it was just we were always with my mom. And so people kind of begin to ask my mom, hey, how's Charles doing? Where's your, what's going on here? And I began to kind of see at a young age, the difficulty that my mom faced in answering those questions. And, and then at 10, whenever they finally sat me down, my mom sat me down and said, hey, your dad's going to be leaving, and we love you, and we just want you to know that this is what's happening. So when people, she kind of basically walked me through, when people ask you, I just want you to be honest with them and tell them what you think. She kind of gave me a moment to say, tell them, if you trust somebody, and if your friends ask you what's going on, you can tell them your perspective. She wasn't embarrassed, and she wasn't ashamed to say tell your truth in this. And so I think that as I got older, I heard, and I was told more about what really happened, but I was protected a whole lot at 10. And again, I kind of picked up on it. You think someone that young probably, you think that they're not aware, but I think kids are more aware than we give them credit for. And so I kind of expected it, didn't want it to happen, but I expected it to happen just because of the things that I was, witnessing. But I will say that being the youngest of 6, I did have those protectors. So it's as soon as my mom left the room, my brother Chase, I'll never forget, walked in, sat on my bed and said, what can I do? What do you have questions? He was just he was 15 years old going through the same thing, similar emotions, but he just knew that I would need to process it a little bit differently. And so I think that really brought us a lot closer too as a family, sibling wise. We're we call each other the J6 Mafia because we're just we'll do anything for each other.
I love that.
So that's a little bit about just that, that experience for me.
How was it the rest of those years being raised by a single mom, and you talk about the church being the refuge? How do you associate that, and why was that for you?
Yeah, I think it's funny because looking back, I don't think there was moments where my mom was doing devotionals, and she wasn't wearing worship music, and she wasn't forcing anything on us. But the one thing that we always did was we went to church. We weren't she wasn't putting scripture right in front of us. She wasn't doing those things. I knew that my mom loved Jesus just the way that she was, and I knew that she was a praying woman. But the one thing that we always did is we went to church, and so I will credit a lot of just that to my youth pastor. They really pulled me in, and I was getting a little bit older. I mean, I was obviously 10 years old, and just going to church and having relationships there really, really changed the game for me. And I wrote down, the church was a refuge. I always felt like I could count on the church.
Wow.
And so, again, my mom didn't, she didn't do anything specific at home that I'm oh, that's why I know Jesus in such a special way. She lived her life to where I wanted to pursue those things, but she prioritized church. And really the relationships and the friendships that I built there outside of school friends, the church, the friends that I found at church, it was just really special. And I think to be a part of that my entire life growing up and prioritizing that really brought relationships. And, I'll never forget my youth leaders and my youth pastors saying, how special you are. We're here for you. We're cheering you on. How can I help you? What can I do? And it never stopped. It wasn't just like, hey, I'm so sorry about what you're going through. We love you. It was like, hey, the next day, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
What can we do for you? Do you want to come to this? How can we pray for you? How can we love on you today? And they just really walked the journey with me, not just in that season, but like literally from there on out. So it was really special.
That's good.
Well, what I love about it is, and I'm just, you use the word youth pastor. I grew up with a youth pastor.
Yeah.
So I know how special that relationship is and how traumatizing events can be as a child and how important those relationships are. And I think what brings it, and I don't know if you're thinking this the same thing, but I think so many families who are in that heat season of maybe just going through a divorce or they're starting to blend their families. And as parents, we're oftentimes very wounded already. So we don't really even have the medicine to give our children. We don't really know what to say because we're hurting so bad. And what I love about your story is just make it a priority. Just get in the building. Just get in the building. Get your kids around some Jesus-loving people. Get them around a pastor. You may not have all the answers as a parent, but if you can make, and I love what you said, we didn't, it wasn't something we saw every day, but we went to church. And that is a big reason why, you found those people. And I think parents, if you're sitting out there and you're like, what, I don't know what to do. Well, go find a local church and get your kids in that church. And you know what? No matter what happens, just go. Just go every week and see what God can do for you. So that's why I love that story.
Well, and I think just being like, to speak to that, just being expectant, like, God, we're in a mess right now, but like, we need community, we need friends, like I need this, like, and just going into that building or place, whatever that is, and just being expectant that God's going to align godly friendships and community and leaders. And I think that's, that's another thing is that I think a lot of kids in blended families, they don't have an outlet or someone that they feel like that they can trust and go to, but being able to have a youth pastor or to have a church that does have like a youth group or something for children and teens, it gives them a place that they can go to, that they can, have someone to talk to and share whatever it is that they're going through. That's so important.
Kids have to have an outlet.
Someone, sometimes other than mom and dad, to be able to say, hey, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm processing. So I'm so glad. That was just so encouraging to hear that.
Well, I love it. It's just a directive step.
It's
sometimes people who are watching our podcast, they're so in, a lot of times in fire seasons, they're in that process of blending or, they're having hard times with their spouses. And all parents are looking at their children going, okay, how do I clean this up? And sometimes they're not even capable because they're broken. So I love that it's a directive step. It's like, listen.
Just get them there.
Just get them there.
Just get them there. It really does work.
I love that.
So Claire, before we were filming, we were also talking about kind of like as your parents remarried and, as you were off in college, talking about your mom and how all of y'all kind of worried about her because she was a single mom and, just that season then up until, your mom remarried, your dad remarried and, going through blending as a young adult too. Can you kind of walk us through that and just like that season with your mom and then the blending?
It was so interesting because, my mom was single for a really long time. And so it's definitely not awkward at first, but at first you're like, oh mom, get out there, girl. And now that I'm older, I felt like I could say that even though it's still funny to look back on. But as I got older, I was like, I began to worry about my mom, because she is at home and, another child leaves the home and it's just me and her. And then I went away for college and it's just like, and then my dad got remarried when I was 17. So I was still at home and even her, watching her walk through that it was hard. There were days where she was really sad, and I would just be like, Mom, that's okay. Like, it's okay for you to be sad. Like, it's okay that I can see you be sad. Like, this is a very real and honest moment for us. And so I think as I was approaching that, I think she started dating, like, as soon as I was getting out of the house. So, like, I was just about to leave. And I was worried, like, she's going to be alone on holidays. Like, I need to come back every weekend and see my mom. And I need to call her and check in on her. It's, like, almost like roles reversed a little bit. But it's just like, we were worried. I mean, I know all my siblings kind of felt that way too. It's like, okay, I want my mom to be happy and I want her to have, you know, her community, but I also want her to like find someone that will like meet those needs and come alongside her. And so as soon as I remember, I think I told you guys this earlier, as soon as she told us, we were all at like a pizza place. We all happened to be in town on one weekend and she was like, guys, I'm seeing someone, and we knew him. So we were like, oh my gosh, yes. We're like clapping. We're like jumping up and down because there is a point you get to as a child where you're like, you just want your parents to be so happy. And, you know, I think there's years where you're like frustrated with them or upset with them. And once you get past that, it's like, I just want my parents to live the greatest life ever. Like, I just want to do everything I can to where they are set. And so we were all in that place where we were like, yes, like go for it. We're so excited.
Awesome.
And then they got married. And so it was just a really cool journey. And we knew him. And so we knew him from when we were younger. So that was like an interesting dynamic too. Like, oh, you're familiar. So that was really comforting as well. And so it was really nice that she got remarried and my dad had been remarried. So that relationship, you know, maneuvering that at 17 was an interesting dynamic as well. And getting to know these people and, you know, is his love now divided into smaller quantities amongst each other? You know, I think I felt that too when my mom got remarried. I thought, is her attention going to be spread too thin now? There's already 6 of us. So there's already a lot. There's already a lot of attention to give. And so I remember thinking like, okay, Lord, I kind of began to worry. The same feelings that I felt at 17, I felt at 23 when my mom got remarried. They were very familiar. I was like, oh, I've been through this. I remember this. Thinking, is her attention going to be divided? Is she going to be able to like be there for me? I will say one thing that I kind of learned in that is like those were definitely thoughts that filled my mind just straight from the enemy. Like I knew my mom loved me and I kind of learned how to have this like, it's kind of funny to say, but I had these like end of discussion moments with the enemy where I was like, I know my mom loves me. I know my dad loves me. I know that nothing has changed. Like end of discussion. Like, enemy, you don't have any say-so in my mind anymore. Like this conversation's over. You know, like I've been in my car and I've been driving and those thoughts creep in and I'm like, no, this conversation's done. Like say no more. Like I know that that that's not the truth. And so it's interesting because even walking through that, I feel like the Lord was teaching me a lot on how to fight against those feelings just because, and obviously I'm older. So I feel like obviously like the Lord's equipped me in certain ways in my time with him. But even at 17, I feel like the Lord is showing me that, like, hey, these thoughts are not the truth. Like, you know what is true, and you know that you are loved, and that doesn't have a place in your mind anymore.
Wow.
So.
Oh, that's so good.
For me, I love verbalization. I love audibly.
Same.
Like
you do the same too. You've talked about that.
Yeah.
Where like the enemy is attacking your thoughts, and you're like,
nope.
I just tell them, I'm like, I know this truth, and this. I don't use this conversation's over. I use. I'm done talking about this. Or I'm done thinking about this.
Yeah.
You know, that's just, you know, but it is real when the enemy comes and does try to take over your thoughts.
Well, and it starts at a young age. Like he's not afraid to go after our children. You know, he's like you know, in the car, like your mom this, your mom that, you know, like that. No. No, you know, but having the maturity, and I'm sure a lot of that comes from, you know, being in youth group and being around people and being, you know, reading the word and being around people who helped train you up. So you know that. You know, you had that instilled in you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of our methods for fighting the enemy. I mean, that's just one of them. I mean, but I think a lot of people, especially in our blended community, that Satan wants to attack, and you know, it's almost like he's already thrown you off the cliff. He just wants you to keep tumbling. And as we go through, you know, a divorce, and then we go through, you know, a process of blending a family, there are so many negative thoughts that come into our mind that, you know, is my mom going to continue to love me? Are my parents going to be okay? All of those things are continued distractors. And
Yeah.
so I love what you said about that.
Yeah, and now that I'm kind of on the other side of it, like I work with students now, and I hear these conversations, and I hear, these circumstances. The Lord has been so gracious to bring students in my path that are going through that. 7th graders who are experiencing that, and so it's been really special to be on the other side of it and say, what's the truth?
Yeah.
This is how you feel, and that's okay. It's okay to be sad. It's okay that your frustrations are valid, but what is the truth here? Like, what is God saying here? And so it's been cool to be on the other side of it and say, like, I'm literally looking at myself, at 17 saying, hey, but what do you know to be true? Like at the end of the day, what is the truth in this? These are all lies that the enemy wants you to believe. So let's find the truth in this and let's stick with that.
So good.
Well, just another example of what Satan meant to destroy you, God will use to build his kingdom.
Yeah.
And those stories of relation, of I can relate to this, I understand this,
Well, it's like you growing up, you said you owe a lot of it to your youth pastor, and now God's kind of like those roles are flipped a little, right? And you're in that position where you're ministering to your younger self. Yeah, that is so cool. I love that. Well, another thing that we were talking about, Claire, is your perspective as a daughter. And that can be from a blended family perspective, or maybe like a daughter of the king, or whatever you want to talk about. But I'd love for you to share on that.
Yeah, I think both and like my perspective, because for a long time I had a hard perspective of like my earthly father and my heavenly father. Like it was they were very different, but in some lights I was like, oh, I see God as the same way I do my earthly father. And, there's been a lot of restoration that's taken place between me and my earthly father. Like my dad, God's done so much since like the 10-year-old Claire to now. And I'm so thankful, but I will say that my perspective as a daughter has changed so much now that I have grown up, just thinking like, I think when you're younger as a daughter, you're like, your dad has to be perfect. Like my dad, there's just in our culture, there's just like this, you identify your dad as like, he can do no wrong.
Right.
And if he does do wrong, you just don't even want to believe it. Cause you're like, there's no way my dad is just the best. Like there's nothing he can do that would make me not like love him so much. And the older I got, I just thought, my dad is human. Like the more that I go through things that are really difficult, I'm like, oh my goodness, he was human, and that's okay. And I think like my perspective of a daughter has changed to say like, my dad is still just as amazing, and I love him just as much as I did then.
Yeah.
Even after everything that we've been through, because like I know God's grace in a completely different way, and I can't relate to everything that my dad has gone through, but I can relate a little bit more now. And so, and then also I think like, as I got to know the Lord on a more like personal level, I think for a long time I just was at church and was just a checklist and do this. And, in kids ministry, like I love kids pastors because they're instilling those truths in you in such a young age. And then you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, this was actually starting way back then. But now that I got to know the Lord on like a personal level, it's like the more I opened up to the Lord, like the more I could be vulnerable with my dad, and have conversations with him and like really understand him. And the more that I was receiving grace, obviously the more I could extend it to him. And
that's good.
And so I would say like from a daughter perspective, it's just different for me now. Like seeing both relationships with my heavenly father and my earthly father, they've changed so much. And in the best ways, I think the more that I have experience with God, the more that I can like relate and understand and give to my dad. So that's
great.
Well, and it's like you have to have, I think this is where so much, like where we just mess it up, whether you're a blended family or not, is like we have to, like if we want to have a relationship with anyone, like it first comes from a relationship with the Father. And knowing what love is, and knowing what grace is, and humility is, and it's first that intimate relationship with Him to know whose we are and who He is and who we are in Him. Who He is in us. And so,
it's good stuff.
It is good stuff.
Well, we always talk about encouragement to blended families.
Yeah.
You want to ask this question? Or do you
No,
want me to?
I was about to, and then I was like, you go right ahead.
Okay. This is the yin and yang of our marriage here.
I love it.
We live out our communication style
we
on
mind melt,
video,
so like
podcasting.
he's thinking what I'm thinking.
And then sometimes we don't mind melt, and it just turns crazy. But we're going to talk about encouragement to blended families. So we always ask, what encouragement from you take everything that you went through, because every blended family that sits in our studio comes from a different perspective.
Yeah.
But this is really from your heart to whoever's listening who needs to receive it. What encouragement would you give to blended families?
Yeah. If I were to just encourage blended families, I would say that your kids, like I think speaking to families with younger kids right now, I would say now that I'm older, looking back on it, or even going through it at an older age, like I think your kids are picking up on more than you think that they are, you know, and they're so aware. They're probably more aware than you think.
Yeah.
But they will really, really appreciate it once they get a little bit further down the road, they're going to look back, and you might not feel their appreciation. Like as a parent, you might not feel their appreciation right now, or you might be, seeing them in a really vulnerable state and going through and figuring out their emotions. But, later down the road, I will say that looking back, I appreciate so many things that my parents did. The way that they loved me, the way that they talked through things, the way that they communicated, even when I didn't really want to say anything, when I didn't really want to talk about it anymore. You as a parent still bringing that up, and you as a child at least listening to what your parents have to say, like those conversations really steered us in the right direction. And I see that now. I didn't see it then, but I see it now, that those conversations were meaningful and they meant a lot to me, even though I probably just ignored it, or, in the moment I, I rolled my eyes, or I was just like, why are we discussing this again? Or why do we have to go there? Let's just push it under the rug, But looking back now, I see those are really valuable conversations for my life. And also those are things that I want to be clear in my communication with my family, you know, and those are things that, I may have rolled my eyes, but now I'm like, I'm actually going to do that in the future with my family and my kids. And so there's definitely things that you may think your kids aren't loving, or they're not appreciating, or, maybe you're not doing the right thing because of based on their responses. But I can guarantee you later in life, they're going to look back and say, I'm so thankful for those moments. Even though it didn't seem like we were thankful, but we were.
Yeah, I remember.
That's encouraging to me.
I remember doing that. I know. I'm thinking about
raising teenagers. I'm like, you do realize this is important. I'm like, no, you do. I know you.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna assume that you do.
We typically hear, like, for the people who are like empty nesters now, they're like, there will be a point when they come to you and they
will come
say,
back.
Thank you. And I remember doing that with my stepdad and being like, I know I was a brat in high school, but I think you're awesome now.
Yeah.
But okay, well, Claire, the last question we have is, and we ask this to everyone that's on the podcast, is what is a blended kingdom family to you?
Blended kingdom family to me, obviously, like, I would emphasize the kingdom part of that, like the Lord center, like central of all of those things. And a blended kingdom family really is one that hasn't figured it out. I will say my family, like, I don't know that we have it figured out at all. Like, I think we have a lot to learn, and on both sides, I think we have a lot to learn, but a blended kingdom family really is a family that's pursuing their best. They're doing their best. They're trying hard. Everyone, from the youngest to the dad to the mom. Like, I think if everyone's on board and trying to make things work and trying to make things better and just really pursuing what God's best, I think that's what that would be for me. You know, and to me, I think that helps everyone. Hey, let's all just get on the same page, and let's all try. Let's all just really try hard to make this really great. And it's just all about perspective and just really being there for each other through really difficult season. Through it gets easier, I would say. That's one thing I've learned. It gets easier, and it's really special.
Yeah, I love it.
That's so encouraging to hear. Yeah, well, Claire, tell all of our viewers and listeners where they can find you, if they want to follow you, any encouragement you're putting out.
Yes. So I would just encourage everyone, like, family is so important, and I think that as you get older, I know from my perspective, as I get older, there is a distance that's created. Just, people move away, your families are in different areas, whatever that looks like. I would just encourage you to keep prioritizing family in whatever way, whatever dynamic you have, whatever that looks like. Just keep prioritizing family however you can, whether that's phone calls or text messages or even difficult conversations again and again like that. Those things are so valuable. And I am on social media. You guys can follow me. It's _ Claire Jennings. But I'm also at Gateway with students and young adults, and would love for you guys to tune in on what we're doing just creatively. We have a lot coming out, a lot of content that we're producing. So yeah, that's me, and I'm just so honored and thankful to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we're so honored and blessed to have you here and just hear your heart and your story. And, it always encourages, even if it's just one person, but I know that there are so many people who are listening that are encouraged by this, especially parents, hearing what children went through and just how they processed it. And for maybe those parents that are in a season right now, where you were.
Yeah.
I know that'll be so encouraging.
Well, and I'm just going to replay one nugget here real quick. If you're in the sound of our voice and you live in the DFW area, let me just go. Gateway Kids, dude, is a cool place.
Off the hook.
So if you're I listened to this and I want to get them in church. Okay, Gateway.
Do it.
Southlake, they got campuses all over DFW.
Yeah.
They're awesome. Get your kids there.
Yeah.
It's a great place, great people. So excited and just thoroughly blessed that you've been with us today. And I know
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you, Claire. Before we jump off, you guys, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, to YouTube, get on, subscribe, hit the little dinger bell thing so you can get notified every Monday of a new podcast or just anything that we have coming out. We don't want you to miss all the good stuff. And you guys, I just also want to take an opportunity to ask, if you haven't left us a review on our podcast, we love to hear from you, what has been encouraging you. I just want to share from Summer, who left us a review and said, Scott and Vanessa's heart for Christ and blended families is simply beyond. This podcast hits home and deep in the heart every time. Thank you, Summer, so much
Thank you, Summer.
That. That was very sweet. But you guys, again, we just love you so much. Claire, again, thank you for being here. Yeah, and you guys, we love y'all. We hope you have an amazing day and be blessed in all that you do.
Take care.
Hey BKF community, we want to hear from you guys. If you would take the time to leave us a review, and you can find us on all social media platforms. Our podcast is on every podcast platform, and you can visit us at our website at www.blendedkingdomfamilies.com.
Yeah, guys, we're trying to reach every blended family all over the world, and we can't do this without your partnership. So please take a minute, share, comment, review, tell your friends. Tell them they can all go to blendedkingdomfamilies.com for great resources.